I have started to use AI, for me at least, effective way, is saying not about the power of its answers, but instead the power of its questions.
AI is changing school, college admissions, and the workforce fast. So the real question is, what skills should students build that won't get automated? Today, I'm sitting down with CEO Ryan Kiick of RevPrep. We've been friendly competitors for the last 15 plus years, but we've both been thinking deeply about how AI will affect students in the future.
Steve Jobs extrapolated that and said, I think of the computer as the bicycle for the mind. I think AI is an evolution on that, right? So it's evolving both. So I call it woman on e-bike. We've already mastered certain skills that now we can offload to AI, but we still have that knowledge ourselves as well. That is very different, in my opinion, than having never acquired those skills in the first place.
That's the crux. Because if the lights go out, no AI, no autopilot, can you still think, communicate, and adapt?
The next mistake would be thinking what it's uniquely great at is providing answers. Because if you view it that way, then it starts to take some of your agency and autonomy.
We talk executive function, deep learning, the future of the college essay, and how to raise kids who can use AI without becoming dependent upon it. If you're a student, a parent, or someone who just wants to stay sharp in the age of AI, this one is for you. Let's get into it.
The Nick Standlea Show.
Ryan Kiick, welcome to the show today. This is fun because we've been competitors of a sort in the test prep industry for 15, 16, maybe more years than that, but we've always had a mutual respect, and I've always enjoyed talking to you when we run into each other at conferences. I mean, you're just a good human and really bright and capable, clearly, and I am excited for you that you're now the CEO of Revolution Prep, and I was really interested when I saw you had a post up that you were really interested in thinking about how students can develop skills that AI won't be able to replicate in the future. And this is a topic that I am deeply interested in. It plays a huge part in a book that I'm working on. And so I just thought, let's sit down, let's talk about this and go from there. So Ryan, where's your thinking right now on this new world all these kids are entering into with AI, and how can they position themselves to kind of future-proof their careers?
Love it. Well, first, let me just underline, I've enjoyed knowing you over the years. Neither of us have aged a day, which is wonderful. So test prep must be kind to us. And I'm happy to be here and excited that you're having success with the show. So thank you for the invitation. It's interesting. AI to me is creating, opportunity in some sides, and then of course creating risk in other. I don't think I'm the only one who views it that way. But where I get excited is this idea of, are you familiar? Steve Jobs talked about the computer as man on bicycle. Have you ever heard his
I
talk?
have not.
Okay, so back in whatever it was, late 70s, early 80s, he's creating Apple. And he talked about a study he had read when he was much younger about the most efficient travelers in the animal kingdom. So it's an interesting one. It's how much energy does it take to move a certain amount of distance, okay? Turns out most efficient animal for travel is the condor, okay, in the entire animal kingdom. So fascinating. And humanity, was bottom third, let's call it, right? Not very good. We all know, right? It's hard for us to even run a mile, sure. So, but one biologist added to the study a very interesting thing, which is, well, what about man on bicycle? Because we can create tools. We're one of the only animals, if not the only animal that can do that. Sure enough, man on bicycle is the most efficient traveler in the animal kingdom. 5 times faster, 4 times less energy, I think, something like that. So Steve Jobs extrapolated that and said, I think of the computer as the bicycle for the mind. It's what's going to accelerate us. So I think AI is an evolution on that, right? So it's evolving both. So I call it woman on e-bike, right? I think it's the better version of man, which is woman, and it's the better version of bike, which is e-bike. So, but it still, I think, is going to be important that our kids stay close to and students stay close to how do they guide those AI efforts, but also where is it not going to help at all, right? Or even if it can help, the risk of offloading that knowledge is too great. Okay. So when I think about that, strong communication skills, real-time agility, right? How do you navigate a challenge when you don't have immediate access to AI? What does it look like to come up with an idea, communicate it effectively, overcome objections? So anything that is kind of real time in nature and requires that one-to-one connection, which I think is going to maintain for quite some time. Resiliency, grit, things of that sort, executive functioning skills, I think will be vital. Where maybe, yes, the ability to, do an algebraic proof or something like that begins to diminish because you can offload some of that. I think there'll be other skills that remain. And then I also think what's really interesting for students compared to you or I, Nick, for instance, or anyone in our, general age bracket and above is we've already, I'm going to be generous, mastered certain skills that now we can offload to AI, but we still have that knowledge ourselves as well. That is very different, in my opinion, than having never acquired those skills in the first place and just allowing AI to do it. Because I think about it, it's like, what happens when the lights go out, right? Like, I can still figure out the tip at a restaurant if the power goes out. But if we get to a stage where students, oh no, I can't have a calculator, I don't get to AI, that to me is a very different outcome. So that's my take, is that we have to focus in on where is there going to be these skills that make us uniquely human and make us uniquely powerful in the interpersonal interactions.
Well, certainly to your last point there, I mean, just writing skills are, how do we teach that in this current environment where you can just kind of throw down a bunch of notes into ChatGPT, especially if you have the paid version, and it just cleans it up, organizes it for you, and you're not developing those skills to be able to organize your own thoughts?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. And I think part of it is helping students understand writing as skill versus writing as assignment. And I think writing as assignment is probably the most common type of writing a lot of students now, right? Which is you have this paper, you have this, whatever it might be. So because it's not a passion of yours, you as a student might not be particularly interested in how well you can defend a position on The Great Gatsby. You're very comfortable just saying, "Hey AI, help me. What did the glasses mean?"
Right.
And maybe that's not the end of the world, right? This is where I try and come back to, which is, maybe for the things that we're always, assignments for a student who's not passionate about that topic in the first place, it's okay to have a little bit more bolstering of tools along the way, much like we use calculators now to take some of the heavy lift off, but it's still not changing the fact that you need to have familiarity with mathematics. But I think that's different than I want to be able to communicate effectively around something that is uniquely my own. So AI knows about Great Gatsby.
Yeah.
But let's say the assignment is, tell me about a time you overcame a unique challenge. What was the grid and how did you feel at that time? AI does not know my experience. AI can't help me with that assignment. And those are the kinds of things I think if we keep bringing those types of things to students where the output can only come from within, it at least forces a draft to come from us. Now you may drop that in AI and clean this up grammatically and, what word would have been more powerful. But maybe that's not dissimilar from asking an older brother or mom or dad or your English teacher, hey, what could I be doing differently here? But I think that's part of it is how do we bring tasks and assignments that are harder to shift off to a platform and make us, again, more uniquely us?
Yeah, I like that solution. It reminds me, once I took a finance class in business school and all the students were really upset and they said this class is so hard. And I discovered why on the first day when he said, you are not allowed to use Excel or any sort of spreadsheet in this class. I need you to learn how to solve these problems by hand. And there was a lot of pushback, even though the guy had been doing this for several years everybody raises their hand. They've got reasons why this is ridiculous. This isn't how we do it in the real workplace. And admittedly, I was one of those people. I said, this feels like we're going back to the Stone Age. I don't need to learn how to do this. But I was surprised a month into it how much I was learning. Once I got over the initial roadblock of how challenging it was to solve these things by hand, I suddenly understood how these different elements, when you calculate a variable interest rate, or how a bond changes over time, the price and yield of a bond change over time. When I had to do it by hand, suddenly it was these connections were formed between the different elements that never would have been formed had I just punched it into Excel, gotten the answer, and moved on. So there's a concern there that kids won't develop that. But I think you make a really good point there where if you're not interested in finance, it would be silly to force somebody to go through those exercises that I went through. I did really want to learn it inside and out, and it helped me to do that. And so maybe the answer to some of this stuff is not binary. And I know we all get stuck in this, I think, because of the thumbs up, thumbs down on social media, right? We want to go, okay, AI is good to help kids to write, or it's bad to help kids to write. It's net positive versus net negative. And I like that you're getting at it might be more subtle than that. And well, go ahead.
No, I think it is. And one, there are studies that show, to your point of having a hand writing, still physically writing your own notes commits things to memory far more effectively than the student sitting in a room, doing laptop. And now imagine a world where they're not even doing that. They're just turning on, a Fathom note taker. There's a million platforms that do this now, to capture all the notes and send them a summary. So
they'll basically record the lecture and then just send a summary.
Correct. And what's really fascinating is that can help you get past the test. In that, great, I'm going to review my notes. Oh, I see this point Professor Standlea made, so I'll keep an eye out. But a month, 2 months, 3 months from now, to come back to that same topic, you probably have already lost it, right? So it's a very short-term transactional way of learning. Whereas taking that time again, handwrite, your chances of recalling it weeks, months later, even having to having not applied it again, is still much higher. So that is where, I think it's about the best use case. Like, when does it make sense? And it's interesting internally here at Revolution Prep, when we are having meetings, discussing, how do we want to approach the new ACT or something like that? We'll run a note taker to make sure that we get to be really present in the conversation.
Right.
And I have found in those moments, it's worked really well because I'm more focused on what you're saying at each moment, hopefully going on to ask better questions because I'm not trying to keep up with my note taking.
Yeah.
But I'm also in a transactional relationship with it. It's a 30-minute. We're trying to get to a couple key points, get to some distilled takeaways, and move the ball forward. But if I actually, want to learn something and keep it, that will not be an effective tool. So I think it's knowing what are we trying to accomplish at that moment, and then saying what's the best approach for that. So I do think it's quite nuanced. And there's fascinating stuff going on in the space, like the ways you can use these tools, the outputs of these tools. But I'll just reiterate, I think one of the most important things is having expertise that you then somewhat, kind of move off to this AI assistant is different than never acquiring the expertise in the first place. And that's where I want to make sure students and hopefully teachers and our tutors, we're all trying to find that middle ground to make sure we're still helping students acquire expertise themselves and mastery.
Right. And you mentioned mastery there. I mean, one of my conclusions here in looking deeply at what, at the present moment, what AI is good at, what it's not, and what different experts in the field think it will become better at, is that deep learning for students is really critical. And by deep learning, I mean learning that has depth and breadth in a subject that you have a deep interest in. Because these creative contributions to various fields, AI is a lot less likely to be able to replicate. And when I say creative, I don't mean just in art or creating a new terrific painting or visual, a piece of visual art, like creative as in creative / innovative, right? I mean, you can be creative in science in the way you approach an experiment, creative in business in the way that you craft a marketing campaign or a strategy. And those creative contributions will come from a deep reservoir of information and learning and long-term retention. And yeah, I think that's where my concern is at, is if school is oriented towards a place where it is quickly absorb just enough information to do well on a test. And just like you said, with the note taker, the automated note taker can help you just get the answers to the test and do well on the test, but it doesn't lead to long-term retention. And I think we need a little adjustment in the way school is structured so that the incentives are aligned with deep learning and really absorbing stuff. Much like how you said, hey, we could make a writing assignment so that the student is incentivized to have to write if it's about themselves rather than The Great Gatsby, which ChatGPT can go just pull those answers for you. It can't pull the answers about what was your personal experience when you had to overcome X and show resilience.
Exactly. Where I think we'll make the mistake in AI usage. So there's two mistakes I think we'll make. One would be, head in the sand. Oh, it's going to ruin the next generation, so we shouldn't use it at all, because I think we use properly, it's a fantastic tool and will accelerate learning. And by the way, give opportunity to students to learn about things that they never would have otherwise. So I think a full stop, I believe it's positive. But then I think the next mistake would be thinking what it's uniquely great at is providing answers. Because if you view it that way, then it starts to take some of your agency and autonomy, and to your point, even creativity and innovation out of it. Because instead you're just saying, oh, I have this problem, answer it for me, right? Where I have started to use AI in a really, for me at least, effective way is saying not about the power of its answers, but instead the power of its questions. So if you can start using AI to say things like, I'm trying to solve insert problem, right? And let's make it for, us a, business, like, oh, we're trying to solve that students more and more are lacking executive functioning skills. Everyone seems to talk about executive functioning skills, but now I'll put my business hat on. But not everyone loves to invest in executive functioning skills. So we have a phenomenal, host of resources on executive functioning, and a lot of folks think their kid probably needs it, but they're still not like seeking out actual intervention, right? So so that's fine. So I tell ChatGPT, we have this company, we have this, and this. We're trying to solve the following problem. I want you to ask me questions so I can get to maybe better understand the challenges we're up against. And then rather than these LLMs just grouping answers together they've seen before, it starts saying things like, how long has that been a problem at the company? Like, what have you tried? What haven't you tried? What is the biggest, and it just keeps going and it keeps going and keeps going. And it helped, us start to stumble on I think I know what it is now. And I don't believe we would have gotten the answer. We got to the answer, but it did force us to just keep thinking and it kept asking why. Now, all of us could have done that for each other, but if you're anything like me, Nick, and my executive team, we all get in a room together. We're a bunch of folks who are accustomed to having the answer. So we like to just go, I bet it's this, or I bet it's that. And then you debate who's right. It's actually in that just like relentless questioning that I think you start to get. So that to me was a great example of AI helped us, but it didn't replace us. It actually made us better in that moment. So I think, how do we think about things like that also as powerful deployment of these tools?
That's really interesting. I want to turn to what do you think is going to happen to the college essay in this new environment?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, there's a lot of things that could happen here. One, it could go the way of the dodo, as they say, right? And it could just, hey, we feel like everyone could be cheating on this, and so let's. The reality is, though, I mean, everyone could be cheating on it already, right? Theoretically,
Right.
Every student who applies could have somebody else wrote it for them, right? So I don't think that's a particularly new thing. It's just that it's made it that much easier and accessible. I think the first wave is colleges continuing to make sure the topic is highly personalized. They already do a good job of this, right? The
Right.
essay's purpose is, we have your transcript, we have your test scores to know if you can keep up academically. What we're looking for now is, are you the kind of person someone would want to room with? Are you going to enrich our campus? Are you going to be, a fit in so many other ways? So they're already dialing in the questions pretty effectively. I think they may need to go next level for a little while. I think eventually that will get kind of, also quote unquote outsmarted or out AI'd. And then I start wondering, what does it look like if instead you have to submit a recorded answer to some of these questions? Imagine a world where you go, here's how it works. We have a platform here at USC. You're going to log in. You're going to be given a question and you get 30 minutes to tell us your answer. And, don't focus on, you might have some ums and ahs because you're real time figuring out, but I'm pretty sure you're not getting, help on that one. So I think there's just creative ways to rethink the method to get that aha moment, that takeaway and personalization from a student. So that's, I think about things like that could happen. Just changes the modality, but not really what a school is asking for and what they're learning about.
Yeah, I was reading how a number of colleges now are using AI to do the first read on college essays. And it struck me as kind of hilarious that you've got kids using AI to write essays, and then AI is doing the first pass on the essays. I thought we are losing the spirit of what we were trying to achieve with these essays to begin with. But that's an interesting idea, the video. And so the kid wouldn't know the question ahead of time.
Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. Obviously, on an essay, you get drafts and you have some time. So maybe it'd be like, be prepared to answer on any of the following questions, or at least themes, so you get some orientation. But on your example of the AI, I can't wait until. I envision in my head this like report coming back about an essay where it's like, oh, I loved this essay. I remember when I wrote it, and you're like, well, yeah, because you're all part of some weird loop here. I think it's real time. I think to me, I think about the way some colleges, very small subset and traditionally, elite, or as the phrase goes these days, highly rejective colleges, use the interview. Which a live interview is just probably not that scalable unless it's AI that starts interviewing these students. But setting that aside, I actually had a lovely experience working the company I worked at before I joined Revolution, called Life Labs Learning. Happy to give them a small plug. They do manager training and stuff like that. But their interview process was phenomenal, and it had some of these, which is, here's a question, please submit a video response, and they did that so that multiple people could view at the same time. But I found myself in that experience realizing, that extemporaneous answer, you get a lot of insights into how somebody thinks through a problem, just like you do in a job interview, right? Hey, tell me about, this. We used to ask a question at one of the companies I worked for. The founder created it as one of those like gotcha questions to a degree. But his question was just, how many school buses were sold in the United States last year? And that was the final question. You'd see somebody go, I'm not sure. I could look. He goes, no, don't look it up. How many were? And they're like, oh, yeah. And you'd see two different types of reaction. Coming back to skills AI can't replicate. You'd see the deer in headlight reactions.
Right.
I wouldn't even know where to begin. I don't know. Right. You would see actually a separate reaction, which was like just a random guess, right? Like 2 million. And then we'd say, why? It feels about right. But then you'd get the one that he was looking for, which was, I don't know. Well, let's see. There's 50 states. Let's assume for a minute there's 100 districts per state. And I guess some already have buses, but maybe they have to buy two. Like, and it didn't matter if your answer was really all. What he was looking for is, in the absence of anything, how do you try and reason to a pretty good informed best guess? right?
Right.
And so I felt that happened during that interview process with that company. And I think that's where colleges could start to replace the essay and get some really interesting insights into a student and how they operate. So
That's interesting. We started using the video questions for interviews at Test Prep Gurus as well. And I really like it. And what's interesting is there are some people who clearly really take the time and energy to prepare for their video questions, and they can re-record them if they don't like their answer. And some of these people, it looks like they have a full teleprompter and a setup, like they wrote out their answer and they've done it.
Sure.
And yet what I draw from that, I mean, it's almost like the school bus question. When I see somebody who goes next level on their preparation and it's coming out like it's extemporaneous, but clearly they prepared it and it's just an incredible answer, I think to myself, well, that's someone who, when they're in a challenging situation, will figure out a way to be better at it than just winging it on the spot. And I feel like a lot of the value these days with standardized tests, with the SAT and the ACT, it's interesting to me that over the last 20 years, as more students have become aware that they could prep, scores have improved across the board resultingly, right? We go, as students become aware, there are more students getting perfect scores today than there were 20 years ago. Oh, I could do that. And so in a lot of ways, what standardized tests select for now are students who will prepare for whatever situation they face in order to reach a future goal. At least this is my going theory. It's very difficult to tease that out through the data.
yeah,
But if you think about it, that's showing the grit, the resiliency, the growth mindset. And those are all qualities. Like, it doesn't shock me at all that the SAT, the ACT have become more predictive of grades in college, graduation rates from college, all that stuff that the New York Times covered from the Opportunity Insights study. And to anyone that wants to look at that, I will link to that in the show notes. And it even, I mean, those standardized tests were even great predictors, better than high school grades, of job placement after college and graduate school placement after college. And it was surprising at first, but when I thought about it, it made sense to me, because it is selecting for students who will prepare for whatever stepping stone is in their way or along the path to get where they want to go.
yeah,
And that video interview kind of works the same way.
yeah. One, you and I would muse on SAT, ACT with you for weeks at a time. But
Sure.
What's fascinating about the SAT, ACT in my mind, and I will say it's funny because here I am, by CEO of a largely test prep company. We do academics also, but and you in your role, but I have kind of a love-hate with these exams, right? I think
Sure.
I think saying they have no value is its own kind of head in sand. I think where they have value is an element that a lot of folks don't want to kind of, quote unquote admit, which is in the last 20 plus years or thereabouts, the number of students with near 4.0 GPAs or above. Graduating seniors, it used to be about 17% of graduating seniors were, 4.0 students or above. When I went to high school, that was kind of it. Probably even a little bit less, probably, like 10%. Now it's over 60% of students.
Yeah.
And so there's two things that could have happened. It could have been we've finally cracked the code and all these kids are getting way smarter and we're getting way better at achievement. And yet you talked about small increases in SAT, ACT scores, but they've nowhere near tracked that increase in GPA, right?
Right.
So where these test scores have become really helpful, and that's why you're seeing the Ivy Leagues go back where for a while it was test optional, is they go, listen, at the end of the day, every single kid who applies here is a 4.5 GPA student. Yeah. But, this group is getting 1,500 plus, and this group is getting 1,200 or 1,300. That feels different. And pains me to say this, but I used to talk about, you maybe have seen this too. I have met so many sharp kids that great GPAs that at first, or even sometimes after practice, just could never knock it out of the park on the SAT or ACT. I've also met a lot of sharp kids with 4.0 GPAs, a lot of kids with 4.0 GPAs that I go, man, 15, 20 years ago, you were never getting that GPA.
Right.
You're just not quite doing what it used to require. I've never met a kid who could get over 1,500 on an SAT that isn't sharp. It's like at its most extreme, to do really well on that exam, it's revealing something about that kid. It may not be all the things that the test makers purport it to be, but I just don't think you can do that well, even with help from folks like me and you. I think we help kids who already have good horsepower get to better scores on that test. There's a certain threshold that if you don't have, you can't get into the upper reaches. So it's super helpful at separating the best students. That's where I think it still has a lot of value, and why the SAT and ACT will stick around. I think its usage in some other areas is overstated. I think when you start having families go, I only got a 1430 and my neighbor got a 1450, and you're like, that's the same kid. That's
right.
You're talking right. So things like that I think is overused. But the SAT, ACT, I think to your point, there's something to it. There's something in the way it reveals a particular type of student. And your point about grit and resiliency is an interesting one, because the part that I also struggle with is we charge for what we do, and as do all places. And so you could easily kind of make an argument. There's a lot of students who don't get access. We have really generous scholarship programs, and we try not to turn away kids over ability to pay, but we're only so big, and there's so many other students out there. But there is with Khan Academy now, right? Completely free prep. It's robust prep. It's good prep. I mean, it really is. What it requires is your willingness to jump in and do the work, right? And so if you do, you can get really far with free prep. Yeah. I think we come in and helping the kids that would struggle with that, a little bit more coaching and kind of bringing along mentorship. But it's out there. And to your point, some kids who still won't even do that amount, right? That's maybe there's a statement within that about how much extra work they'll do on any pursuit that seems difficult. So I think you're right. There's some insights driven out of that for sure.
Quick pause. This is important. There are only 3 things you can train in life: your craft, your body, and your mind. Most people work on the first 2 and just hope the third one shows up when it matters. That's why I'm recommending Finding Your Best by Michael Gervais. I've done the course myself. It's excellent. It's not motivational, not fluffy. It's structured to train the skills that actually drive performance: confidence, recovery, trust, grit, clarity under pressure. If you ever feel capable on paper, but inconsistent in real life, this is about closing that gap. I don't put my name behind a whole lot of things. This one earns it. You can find the link below. No urgency, just a genuinely solid tool if you're serious about getting better.
Ryan, let's talk a little bit about your background and what led up to you getting here. Usually I start with that, but we just jumped into the meat of it today.
Let's do it.
Because I'm so excited about this topic. But how'd you initially get into test prep, and then eventually how do you end up CEO of Revolution and everything that happened in between?
Yeah. So, man, when I was a late teenager, I just thought to myself, what career would be amazing and rewarding? And I thought, test prep. No, never. I wanted to be a writer. I was an English major, film studies minor.
So many of us do. We're going to just take a quick time out. Why do you think that is? There's so many people that they think they're going to be writers, and then they end up in test prep.
It's a good question. One is, maybe we tended to be pretty good at some of the exams also. So, particularly at least the verbal side, I think it means there's something about enjoying probably entertaining in an audience. And I think that is a little bit of what tutoring is also, and teaching, right? So somebody smarter than me could figure out that connective tissue. But yeah, you're right. There's something. And I also think for a time, tutoring was one of the better, it was the gig job before we had a lot of this stuff. So I could speak for me, pursuing being a screenwriter, and I moved out to Los Angeles from New York, and I was working at a studio doing, the low level stuff, but, grinding, but I needed to make some money in addition. So, here I became an SAT tutor because it was available and it was a strong job. You kind of set your own hours to a degree, nice hourly rate. And so, but I did it to just get a job. I'll start with that. That's how it started. But I fell in love with it. Like there was something I didn't realize at the time, but there's something about being at that kitchen table, with that kid that was thinking there's no way they can get over this hurdle. And, these tests, unfortunately, you start getting into those emotions of like, I'm not good enough. And, you're like, yeah, you are. You're just, let me show you a couple things that you're just not thinking about that's different. And you'd see the confidence jump, and you're there, and mom and dad are asking you questions about schools, and you just realize like this is such a cool, important time for these kids. So loved it. Then ended up opening a branch for the company I was working for at the time up into the Bay Area. And then sadly, the gentleman who founded the company I worked for at the time, Eureka Review, as a young man, came down with cancer and passed away. But I began running the company for his widow. And then later we helped sell it to the Princeton Review. So that way, she did not want to run an SAT, ACT tutoring company for the rest of her life. And I understood that. So we did that. And I went and worked at Princeton Review for many, many years, oversaw a lot of their activities in North America, both for the high school and grad. And then eventually left test prep because many, many years ago, I thought, man, this testing optional movement seems to be really taken on. And, I don't know if I want to be in an industry that's disappearing. Let me try something else. And I went and did some other fun things, but man, test prep just kept going, and, the hurdles to get in. So eventually folks I know at Revolution on the board kept calling saying, hey, we'd love to have you join. And we think, we're at the right time for the organization, and we think your background. So I finally relented and said, yeah, let me jump back in. And again, similar to that first path when, I did it to do it and then fell in love, I kind of was like, okay, it's an interesting opportunity to be at the top of an organization. Let me take that for personal growth. And then, I'm like a week into the conversations with this team, and I'm like, yeah, I love this stuff. I love helping these kids, like what they're up against. And, the testing optional movement was like, to me, like one of the worst things you could do as a college is say, it's up to you if you want to do that. What do you mean it's up to them? You don't make the essay optional. You don't make like submitting grades optional. Just, it's fine to be no testing. But then say it's no testing, so at least kids don't stress about it. They didn't know what to do. It's like paralyzing. So it was an interesting time to get back into it, and I've enjoyed it ever since. So there's my journey, Nick.
I like it. I like it because I really identify with that. How surprisingly rewarding it is. I mean, I as you told that story, I can remember the first time I was working with this young gentleman who he was clearly a very capable guy, but he was struggling to just get over that last hump, right? I mean, he was truly Ivy League material and couldn't get the score that was going to put him in the mix, in the conversation around admissions. And when he got over 1,500 on the SAT, it was more exciting for me than anything I had achieved personally. Like, and that's when I was like, oh, I like this more than I thought I did. And yeah, I think that's at the heart of anybody who's really good at this, who spends decades doing it. I mean, it just comes back to that basic connection with students. And so thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
How else? Oh, go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I was going to say it comes back to you and I talking about running into each other at conferences and things, that's what I see also from you and a few other folks in this space, not all, but certainly not only you and I, but who show up and they share that expertise openly. They share that joy with others, observations, tips, things like that. So I think that's a big part of it is it's this willingness to share and that because the joy of, to your point, even if you end up helping a kid do great like you just did, they didn't do it through Revolution, but I love that. I love that experience. I go, I know what it's like to sit with that kid. I'm so glad they found you. So thank you for sharing that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my philosophy on all of that is if you're surrounded by people that have those same intentions and want to help kids achieve their goals for the future, why wouldn't we share ways to be more effective at that? I understand everybody wants to protect their secret sauce, or at least that instinct to protect it. Like, well, I'm doing something nobody else is. I don't want to give it away. And yet, I find only good things happen from just freely giving it away. When you tell people what works and then they go use it and they're more effective,
I feel the same.
I don't know if we want to call it karma or whatever, but eventually people come to respect you and want to spend more time with you for freely sharing that information. And on a personal level and on a business level, good things happen as a result from not trying to hoard information.
Yeah, I agree. We're aligned for sure.
Where else do we think college admissions is going to change in the future?
Yeah. Well, now forget AI for a moment. I think the biggest challenges colleges are up against is the declining confidence among the American population in college.
Yeah.
I was at a conference, ASU GSV, which is big ed tech conference, happens every year. It's a combination of ed tech companies and then ed leaders. And I was at a session, and the topic was, all the disruption in college right now, whether it's AI, whether it's, political leadings, and not even judging that, but they're just saying there's a lot going on for us right now. And so they were all talking about in the moment. And the one panelist who really resonated with me said, I think we're all reacting to the now, but the thing we didn't react to about 15, 20 years ago is our biggest problem, which was, I think it was 2009. 2009, I think, was the first time a survey of the American population showed a slight decline in the belief in the value of college education. And it was a small, it was like 2%. It was a blip, kind of ignored. Then it happened again another year or two later. And it felt like it was with just a certain group of, like, it was just, and colleges just kept going like, oh, they don't get it. They don't get it. They don't get it. And actually, it was really fascinating. It was at the time the panel was talking about DEI and, kind of that flux. And this leader said, and it really landed with me, he said, we're up here talking about and trying to defend DEI programs. He said, which I believe in. He said, but more than half of the American population no longer believes in the value of what we do. That doesn't sound very inclusive. And that really struck me. And there's this moment in the room, kind of got quiet because it wasn't not what people wanted to hear. But I think that's what colleges need to wrestle with, which is, yes, there's all the things that you can't measure about getting a college education that I benefited from, socialization, maturation, all the, but also I better be able to get a job that helps me, pay off some debt or whatever it might be, depending on your family circumstances. And short of that, it gets really hard to say it's worth, $50,000 a year to go learn how to be an adult. That's very, very difficult. So I think they have to wrestle with that. And I think until they do, you're going to see more and more. A school just the other day actually announced it's closing. You're going to see more of these smaller regional schools, I think, really struggle with viability. And I think you're going to see more and more applications go to the schools that kind of prove out their pipeline of career placement after. And I'm not sure we want to get to a point where it gets really narrow and it's only about that transactional nature, but you ignore that, I think, at your, kind of detriment. So not you specifically.
Well, you mentioned one of the mistakes we might make with AI is just putting our head in the sand and trying to ignore it. And I feel like ignoring the ROI, return on investment, for a college degree, it's not everything of your college experience, but it is an aspect of it. That is a critical piece for the reason people decide to go to a 4-year institution. And to ignore that completely is putting your head in the sand and a major mistake. I have a few thoughts on this. You're really
let's hear it.
Getting my wheels turning here. Well, I had this amazing conversation over the weekend. So I went to Pitzer College, and one of my favorite professors was retiring. And so I went to the retirement party on Saturday. Dr. Nigel Boyle, thank you for being you, Dr. Nigel Boyle. And over the last 10 years, he started a program called Inside Out for Pitzer College, where incarcerated individuals can take classes while they are incarcerated. And then some of these people, when they're released, they're fully admitted into the program and take classes on campus. Some of them have a supervised release while they're actually still in prison, but they can take classes on campus. And they have had insane, amazing results. And several of these individuals spoke at his retirement. And I was so moved by this one gentleman. His name is Kenny Butler. And I went up and talked to him afterwards and just said, I need to hear more about your story. And he had been in prison for over 20 years, originally had life without parole, but through becoming educated, realized there were some problems with his case, got a retrial, ends up being released, and then is able to take classes on campus. He finishes his BA at Pitzer. He's now working on a PhD and is traveling the world. He became a Fulbright scholar. He's traveling the world through these different programs to work on prison reform. And so looking at different prison systems in other countries and lessons we can learn and bring them back to the United States. An incredible individual. Next month, we're going to do an interview with him. But what really struck me was I asked him about this. I said, I see so many kids these days that are coming from an extremely privileged place. And, very different than you, Kenny, because Kenny, some of his relatives were founding members of the Crips in LA, which we're all familiar with. He was one of the head shot callers for them. Those are his words, not mine. And I said, what do you think about these kids saying they don't think they need college anymore? They can just go out and go join Google and good things are going to happen for them. And he said, well, I can't speak to any of them, but he just said, nothing has transformed my life like education and learning deeply and creating this hunger to learn and then create change in the world. And I don't know how this connects back to all these students thinking that they don't need college anymore, but it was refreshing and inspiring to hear this individual talk about how education had transformed his life. And maybe some of these kids need to hear more stories like that, because for him, there was a huge, obvious return on investment because of the cost of college, personally, professionally, on every level. And I still think there's value for students, but maybe colleges and educators like us, we need to figure out how to communicate that better to some of these students.
I think so. Well, I think that there's twofold, which is the ROI, which you talked about. There's two variables, right? Which is the success earned on the other side, which is what you're talking about right now, which I think we have to do a better job of helping people with. Also help them realize that outcome is tied more towards like your major than an individual institution. I always joke, if you want to make a good living, go get an accounting degree from CSUN. Don't be a sociology major at Harvard, because I could tell you which one out of the gates for just a job is the better choice. But then there's the flip side or the other side of the coin for ROI, which is the investment before the outcome, which is the greater that is, the more I need the return to be large. And what's really gotten, out of sorts, at least perceptually, is the cost of going to college. And what's really interesting is colleges will be quick to tell you, rightfully, by the way, how the average price paid by a student is, maybe only 30% of their sticker price, that you see on their website. But the problem is that requires education and explanation, right? Which is, okay, wonderful. But what about the person who doesn't have a college counselor, that's equipped with that knowledge in their district, or doesn't have a family member that went to college before and knows some of that nuance, and instead just clicks on a couple websites and sees $65,000 a year staring back at them and just checks out immediately because they go, $250,000, like there's no world. And the reality is that student may have had a $0 cost of attendance. Yeah. But it's not what you see, and it's not what a lot of the headlines are always about, NYU now charges $75,000 a year. It's like, yeah, but very few will ever pay that. And the folks who do pay it can. So, it's not a burden. And yet there's this race to go up. Like it's really almost perverse. Like there's a race at colleges to charge more and admit fewer students. It's like kind of the opposite of what you'd want for accessible education. Of course, they're admitting fewer students because more and more students are also applying to 35 colleges. It's like you get in this weird cycle. Like, well, if the low admit rates, I better apply to as many as possible. But now if one student has 30 applications, colleges, we're going to turn away a lot more applications. So that's what I worry about. Excuse me, we have to be talking about all sides of it, right? Which is like outcomes, higher ability, skills that matter. I think we also be talking about the cost of attendance to make sure that transaction really works out in your favor. And then, of course, there's room for which I think is very real. Once you answer, can they launch you to the career you're passionate about? Can you afford it? Which I think have to be like primary decision drivers. Then you get into, okay, great. For those that check both those boxes, which one has the environment I'm more excited about? Which one, size of school, extracurriculars? Do they have a big sports program or not? All those things that matter about the quality of your lived life for your time there. But I think a lot of folks start with that. And all of a sudden, because they've decided they have to go to a school with like a D1 football program in an area wherever, like, you narrow your schools down with the wrong criteria first. And now you're stuck with it's expensive or it doesn't have great careers for me. And I think you have to think about what do you want after college, and then begin to kind of, hierarchy of needs for that one for Maslow, just to say, okay, what matters first? Okay, I need to have employment. I need to be able to afford it. And then you get to those other ones. And then you've put the power of the decision, I think, back for students. Whereas by chasing a brand, you've put all the power back at a college. Like if you've decided there's only 2 colleges you'd be happy at, that college gets to charge almost as much as they want because you're like, that's the only place I'm going to go. That doesn't work. So
this episode of the Nick Standlea Show is brought to you by Zapier. If you've ever felt buried in repetitive work, copying data, moving files, sending follow-ups, it's like death by 1,000 mouse clicks. Zapier has always been the tool that fixes that. It connects over 8,000 apps: Google Drive, Slack, Notion, Gmail, MySpace, you name it. So your tools can finally play nice together. But here's the big shift. Zapier now lets you create AI agents with their ChatGPT integration. Think of them as tireless teammates who never complain, never take lunch, and never get bored of doing the boring stuff. I've actually made several of these little agents myself. No Python, no JavaScript, just pure vibe coding, which is my favorite kind of coding, because even though I have no idea how to code, I just talk to the AI, tell it what I want, and almost magically, it works. For example, when a podcast guest books a time, Zapier can send them a personalized email from me, preparing them for the show, create a draft of show notes, update my calendar, and even prep a social media post automatically, all of which frees me up to focus on the important stuff, like taking credit for the amazing work my agents did. And now, Zapier just took it up another level for developers. Zapier MCP is available right inside ChatGPT, which means you can connect those 8,000 plus apps and trigger workflows just by writing what you want to happen. Literally, you tell ChatGPT, send this file to my team in Slack, update the spreadsheet, and draft an email, and Zapier plus ChatGPT figure out the right tools, do it for you. Getting started is simple. Head to the Zapier ChatGPT MCP server and add the tools you want ChatGPT to access. Follow the steps in the Connect tab. And if you're an admin on a ChatGPT Enterprise account, you can enable MCP across your entire workspace. So if you're ready to stop wasting time on busy work, join the AI revolution, and make a little automation magic of your own, try the Zapier ChatGPT integration using the link below.
Yeah, so the sticker price one you mentioned, and it strikes me as a huge sticking point for a lot of families, especially those that are not extremely well educated on the process. I mean, if we have a school charging $75,000 for tuition before room and board, granted, most families are not paying that sticker price, but most families also don't understand that most families are not paying that sticker price. Right. And it seems like there's a incentive there to raise the sticker price so that the huge donor family who can afford it, well, we let's keep inching that number up to increase this endowment, and we can have a few more chancellors and department heads that oversee things, because the administration across the country, I mean, administrative jobs in colleges have far outstripped new faculty jobs. And that doesn't strike me as a great situation for your average family, and it would erode confidence in the system as a whole. Are these people really putting my best interests first? I mean, if you're looking at it with a skeptical eye and not just going, oh, I automatically need to go to a 4-year college with a great reputation, you're going, oh, okay, so the sticker price is at least $250,000 and looks like it might even approach $500,000. That sounds like somebody that's trying to take money out of my pocket. I mean, I can emotionally, I can empathize. I don't think that's actually what's going on, but I can understand how it might look that way to certain families that are looking at this with a skeptical eye.
Absolutely. I agree. Well, and what ends up happening is, to your point, colleges in deference to them, I think they're largely always well-intentioned. I think that they're trying to deliver great outcomes for the students that come to campus. But I also think that they're also in competition themselves, right? You can only go to one school. You get to pick from a couple if you're admitted. So why us? So there's lots of times investments in, the quality of the facilities. There's investments, to your point, in, making sure research and, those outcomes are great, and publishing and all the things that make it a better recruiting engine. But it doesn't necessarily lead to, increased spots for students, for instance. Like I've often wondered, Harvard, for all the endowment, all these, they could have expanded so they could house twice as many students. Right. It could have been a choice they made and said, man, wouldn't it be great to get Harvard education and all of the things we're proud of to twice as many students as we ever have before? But of course, then what does that mean for admit rates and, all the things that, it's a choice. And so if you're not going to admit more students, and by the way, you could potentially earn more money for the university because you have more students paying a certain amount of tuition. But instead, they try and transact more on the same base of students. And so that's that race. And it's, again, I come back, U.S. News and World Reports and things like that. And even the, existence of companies like ours, like all of them play a small part in this belief that like, it's all about getting to the next level and you're chasing that. And I think about my own story. When I went to college, there's a handful of students. I did not go to an Ivy League school. There's a handful of my students in my school who did. But then it was a lot of like, where are you going without judgment, right? So I ended up going to one of the states. I'm from New York. I went to SUNY Albany, happy to share. So the equivalent of the UC school system for, California folks, the SUNY system in New York. Went there, had a great experience, thought it was lovely in many ways. And I had friends go to all sorts of different colleges, really. But there was never at that moment for those parents or us, and we were, middle class, like, fairly striving area. There wasn't like well, I'm sure that's nice, And now you get this kind of country club. I think a lot of it is around the parents, like what bumper sticker can I put on my car? What can I tell my neighbors? And that, I think now you're moving it from, isn't it great that your kid went and got a college education, which should have value no matter where you went, to almost it only counts if it's from one of these universities. And that, right, I think, is what kind of tips the dominoes that then lead to all the other things that have gone a little sideways in higher ed, unfortunately.
Right. They're playing status games, which lead colleges to then respond to that, the market, and feed in to the status games.
Totally. Absolutely.
Well, let's round this out with what can parents and students looking at this environment, what are some things they can do to pick the right school, to navigate that college admissions experience, and hopefully build some skills that AI is not going to be able to replicate along the way or in 10 years?
Yeah. Okay, great. So one, I always like to begin in a setting like this. The best advice you can get is advice tailored for you based on, your school counselor, folks in your network that know this best. But in general advice, I think one of the most important things you could do, like any choice, is become a more informed consumer, but actually be more crystal clear on what is the outcome that matters most. If the outcome that matters most is name brand school, by the way, not an outcome I think it should be, but assume, well, that gets pretty straightforward. There's probably a small list of 20 universities, by the way, all incredibly difficult to get into. And you got to do your best to be at least somewhat eligible and then hope kind of it all works out for you, right? But if it's, I want to go be this profession, right? Great. Does that profession require usually a graduate degree? It does. Okay, well, guess what? No one's going to care what undergrad you went to if it requires an MBA. The thing they're going to look at is where'd your MBA come from? So now, okay, if I want to make sure that is a really name brand university, that does not necessarily require you're at a name brand undergrad. In fact, go to maybe an undergrad where you're one of the higher performers. Go get an honor scholarship, be in the special dorm, get all the benefits, be a high flyer there, and then go apply to, Yale, Harvard Business School, whatever it might be, and now pay that high price and things for the 2 years, but on something that has proven to be pretty transactionally valuable. Like if you have a graduate degree from some of the elite schools for certain careers, it matters. That has not that correlation's never really been proven at the undergrad level. Again, that's where major matters more. And you go, okay, it doesn't require an elite college degree. What does it require? And you kind of back out and go, okay, how much now flexibility do I have where I don't have to be beholden to a small subset of schools, right? And make those kinds of choices. Because I think if you do that again, I always come back to they're going to advertise the 8%, admit rate at Harvard, or 4% these days kind of thing. I would say, who has the lowest admit rate in the country is you, right? Like you can only go to one college and there's 3,000. So they're doing everything they can to convince you to show up at almost any university. So become that informed consumer so that you've really put it back in your favor. And then the other thing, coming back to these kind of like sticky skills, these irreplaceable skills, I think that's like, make sure your executive functioning skills, prioritization, organization, motivation, things like that, being able to move things into working memory quickly and efficiently, really prioritize those and work on learning skills. Because at this point, everything is moving so quickly. Any modern employer will tell you the relevance of your degree and what they taught you is like probably within 2 years, almost irrelevant. It's, are you learning now on the job? Are you, and that's, being a learner is a skill. Yeah. It's like, that is not memorization and parroting. That is, adaptation, curiosity. So you lean into those, and I think that's how you navigate what is going to be a disruptive labor market for the next for us for long as we could foresee it right now. And I think that's where you double down as best you can. I think that's how I would kind of pour a moat around my viability as an employee, is to say, be as flexible, agile, and quick a learner as possible.
Yeah, I think it was Google who, there was a conference and somebody posed to one of their, it wasn't the CEO, but it was a high level individual within Google. And they said, what's more important, to someone to have a great computer science degree or have actual coding skills, right? They were basically trying to get at this question of, is college important for hiring at Google?
Yeah.
And he said, I don't think of this as an either or question. It is yes and. He said, yes, I want you to have hard coding skills. And maybe that's taught in school and maybe it's not. He said, if you've really got the goods, you're doing that on your own and you're driven and you're going into that on your own. He said, where I like a college degree is to teach the critical thinking skills that will keep your skills relevant in the future. And I thought, wow, if a college were to just say that with their marketing materials, you suddenly could create confidence again in at least that institution.
I would think so. I like that. I think that's a good place for us to go. Combination of those, curiosity, thoughtfulness, and then to your point, this excitement about evergreen learning. And I think that could be trained, that could be learned. And I think that could be a great part and a valuable part of the college experience for sure.
Absolutely. Well, Ryan, I know you need to get going. I really appreciate your time to take a moment to sit down, talk. Really enjoyed this conversation and can't wait until we connect again in the future. Yeah.
Sounds good. I look forward to it. I appreciate it, Nick. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, and Ryan, if anybody wants to learn just more about you, where are the best places to find you online?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, if you ever want to reach out to me personally, I'm on LinkedIn, probably one of the better places to find me. You can feel free to message me anytime. But if you wanted to, seek out help from Revolution Prep, best thing you can do, revolutionprep.com. And again, we're big on the creating better learners, grit, resiliency, executive functioning, alongside the, hey, what are 3 quick tips to, outsmart an SAT math question? So feel free to check us out there anytime as well.
Fantastic. And Ryan, I'm going to put that in the episode. We're not going to cut it out, even though we're sponsored by Test Prep Gurus. I appreciate. Yeah, go ahead.
How about this? If you don't like what you find at revolutionprep.com, check out my friends over at Test Prep Gurus.
There we go. Perfect. There you go. Perfect. That's good. That's good collaboration right there.
That's it.
All right, Ryan, you have a great day. Great to see you. And
you as well.
All right.
Sounds good. Be well.
Okay, everybody, until next time, ask questions, don't accept the status quo, and be curious.